And as people are logging on, welcome to this evening's webinar, Technology and Cities, Reshaping the Urban Landscape. Thank you all for joining, and I apologize again for the technical problems with the incorrect link. Hopefully we'll have everybody coming on here in just a minute. So we do have some people continuing to log on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started with just a couple of quick announcements, and that will give just a minute or so to allow others to join in. Again, welcome to this evening's webinar, Technology and Cities, Reshaping the Urban Landscape. This is a presentation and panel discussion featuring representatives from City of Alexandria, Virginia Tech, Smith Group. This evening's event is organized and co-hosted by AI Northern Virginia and AI Virginia, the Committee on Architecture for Education. This evening's session will be recorded. It will be available through the YouTube channel, AI Northern Virginia. For this evening's presentation, many of us, of course, have been doing these webinars for a long time, but just as a reminder, this is a webinar format and not the regular Zoom meeting. And as such, there are a couple of tools. The Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen, the icon with the two speech bubbles. That is the one where we encourage you to put questions in, especially, you can put them in at any time, but especially as we come to the end of the prepared presentations in advance of the facilitated discussion. Our moderator for this evening will be looking at the question and answer panel and be ready to respond to questions as they come up. The chat function will be reserved for messages from the host. There may be websites that I will point your attention to during the presentation or other information that will need to go out, but please do not use the chat for questions. Our moderator will not be looking at that. If your Zoom connection falters for some reason, just stay there, let your internet connection come back up. And as a reminder, in the webinar format, the cameras and microphone function for participants will be off. So please use the question and answer window as a way to communicate with the host and the panelists for this evening. This evening's presentation is approved for 1.5 AI learning units. Upon completion of the webinar this evening, people who have participated will have information filed with AIA, and you should receive confirmation within a week or two. The course material will be 1.5 AIA elective learning units. And now I'd like to introduce a representative from the Committee on Architecture for Education from AI Northern Virginia, just to give you a little bit of an introduction to the group that organized this evening's event.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Good evening. I am Maureen Weichert, representing the AIA Northern Virginia's Committee on Architecture for Education. For those unfamiliar with the CAE, you can see here a summary of who we are and a little bit of our mission. Our committee's focus for the event this evening is to take a deeper dive into the impact of technology on the development of cities and how urban academic institutions are adapting to this shift. Our moderator this evening is Brian Sykes. Brian currently serves as a senior project manager in Inova Health's Design and Construction Group. After 20 years of working on various healthcare and research-focused projects for leading architecture firms, he is now responsible for the landmark mall site for Inova. So thank you, Brian, for being here and leading the discussion this evening. And with that, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you, Maureen. So real quick, I'm going to introduce panelists and then I'll turn it over to them. We've got Robert Kearns with us tonight. He is the Development Division Chief with the Planning and Zoning Department for the City of Alexandria. We were talking about this before we kicked off the panel. Alexandria is a pretty active place to be right now, and I know Robert's not bored. Between this innovation campus, the work at Landmark Mall, in that redevelopment. Potomac Yards, everywhere else, Alexandria is a happening place. Lisa Morris is the AVP for planning and also the campus architect down at Virginia Tech. She's assumed this role in 2019. She's been with Virginia Tech since 2017. She's got a pretty cool charge as part of her job description, in that she really does get to look at the long-term planning of not just Blacksburg's campus, but all of the campuses across Virginia Tech's purview. Sven Shockey is a corporate director of design for Smith Group. The thing that gets Sven out of bed in the morning is really high performance design, really focused on sustainability, placemaking, and he is going to share with you some really interesting things that they're doing right now with Virginia Tech. And then Jamison Caldwell, he is a lead mechanical engineer with Smith Group and also a principal with them. Again, he focuses on high performance design, loves complex problems and finding simple, elegant solutions for them. And he probably is one of the most collaborative engineers you'll find in the business. So with that, I'll turn it back over to our presenters and let them get through this, and then we'll pick it up again with Q&A. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brian. So I'll get us started off here. We're really pleased to bring forward to you today this case study of Virginia Tech's Innovation Campus and our opportunity to reshape the urban landscape. So for my segment, I thought it might be helpful not only share the urban planning and design, but also give a brief look into some of the deal making, a few other highlights, and my colleagues will cover other facets of this project process. So how did we get here to this position to impact the urban fabric of Northern Virginia and Alexandria in particular? Our story begins in August of 2018 with the Commonwealth's Virginia's our bid for Amazon HQ2. The Virginia Economic Development Partnership decided to take an approach to focus on degree production in computer science and computer engineering. And with a narrow focus like that, they were really looking to align with both Amazon's needs as well as to attract other tech companies. And they were seeking higher ed partners to join them in this proposal. Well, so next slide. This ushered in the tech talent pipeline. Virginia Tech stepped forward in August of 2018 to join the state in this proposal to Amazon and to commit to delivering a significantly more computer science and computer engineering degrees. There was a direct alignment with our current strategic goals and initiatives. Virginia Tech has held a footprint in the DC metro area for over 50 years, and we were seeking to grow that. And so this opportunity fit very well with that, as well as with our land grant mission. At the time, I was working with Sasaki on our university master plan. And so when this opportunity arose, I worked with them to reverse engineer a program around that tech talent pipeline degree production that the state was looking to achieve. And so the visions coalesced. Next slide. And then in November of 2018, Virginia emerged as the favored site for HQ2, and things got really interesting then. At the state level, facilities appropriations packages were crafted for Virginia Tech to both support our undergraduate end of this pipeline here in Blacksburg, where I am today, and for our facilities that we would need to support the graduate level degree production in proximity to HQ2 and National Landing. We were tasked with the delivery of classes at a new innovation campus facility by fall of 2024. And at that time, that was a monumental undertaking since we were literally starting from scratch. So I'll cover just a few of the highlights, but there are many layers to this. There's many layers of thought and activity, and I am really just representing a very big team effort here today as just one individual out of many. So next slide, please. In January of 2019, we developed our guiding principles by then. So we were moving very quickly, but we knew we had to. And these have been our touchstone throughout this entire development process. And we check back with these at every point along the way. They provide us guidance for our decision making. And the result that you will see is really an embodiment of these principles with a high integration of technology directly into our campus fabric. Next slide. As we undertook this effort, we were shaping the campus vision as we were going along, right in parallel with all of our other progress. And so we identified early that our success here would require us to look beyond our campus borders in order to really create this vibrant campus that we wanted. We knew that we had to think and plan intentionally at a district level. And this all required additional effort and capabilities and time and energy. But it really was necessary in order to drive us towards the successful, thriving campus ecosystem and innovation continuum that we knew was necessary over the long haul. Next slide, please. We studied our context in great detail, and these are just a couple of ways that we sliced through that. What were our opportunities here? And also we wanted to know what our must-haves were. For example, mobility and connectivity, very, very important. And these were also central to our principles, but key to unlocking our success here. Next slide. Many scenarios were investigated in that early time. This was just one of those big trajectory checks that we went through. I proposed to our leadership 3 potential end states for our campus. What did we want to be when we grew up, right? And their response back to me gave very clear direction. Without question, the university wanted the look and feel of a cohesive, centralized campus. And so that gave me a lot of information. And next slide. Once we had that established, we coupled that with benchmarking and identified where we wanted to fit into a larger East Coast system, innovation ecosystem, with other innovation campuses and sites around the country. Where did we fit into that? And then we also conducted internal workshops to understand what our university internal community needed from us in order to, that they felt that they need in order to thrive there. And that in turn gave us something that we could provide to our development partners later on in this process, but it also directly informed our planning. Next slide. So while we were evaluating sites, and we'd partnered with Alexandria's Economic Development Partnership as well as the city, an opportunity came up. The North Potomac Yard developers saw Virginia Tech as a catalyst for launching development of their phase 1. And so Rob's going to cover that in a lot more detail in his section. But essentially, phase 1 of North Potomac Yard, if you're looking at the top left from blocks 4 through 20, is approximately phase 1. North is green left here. And as you can see in the lower left with the photograph there of the prior site in an aerial view, there was a theater on that phase 1 site in a sea of parking, essentially with retention ponds at either end. And phase 2 of that development is where you see the current strip mall site. But we saw this as the golden opportunity that we really needed. It aligned with all of our visioning, and the small area plan already featured a new metro station at the south edge. There was a linear park, a long-term mix of retail, residential, and office, and really great connectivity, including the metro, but otherwise as well. And it really supported long-term growth potential there too, with the phase 2 was opening up a whole nother area of development. And so it checked all the boxes for the seeds that we needed to grow a successful innovation campus within a successful innovation district. And so throughout this process, I really wanted to emphasize how critical our partnership was and continues to be with the city of Alexandria. I know that we wouldn't be in the excellent position that we're in right now without their hard work and support to help make the innovation campus happen. But that said, you know, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were no challenges with the city, but that we collectively faced. For example, the pandemic happened right in the middle of this. And then the small area plan that I have up on screen right now presented some challenges to us as well, where we ideally wanted to locate our campus at the north end of that phase 1. In the small area plan, there was an above grade parking garage there, and it was the only one that had been currently allowed in all of the North Potomac Yard small area plan. So that had value from a development perspective. But this would have been a wall between us and the rest of the district. The north of that site, block 4, was designated essentially a K-12 school site. And while that relationship was really important to us and an innovation continuum, we knew that we needed to aggregate that site in order to be able to create that complete campus that my leadership was looking for from an end state perspective. So there was some challenge there. Next slide, please. Another challenge was the zoning envelope itself, which included FAA height restrictions, National Park Service setbacks, and some height limits related to that, as well as the rest of the zoning envelope. But as it turns out, and this is a lemons to lemonade story, this challenging zoning envelope actually partly drove the innovative process and design outcomes to the building envelope that were developed by Smith Group. And we're really excited with the results. And so Sven will share more about that story with you a little bit later. Next slide. So we developed multiple urban framework scenarios within what we had to work with there. And this directly informed our negotiations and back and forth with the development partners. Virginia Tech, we were really looking to the future. We had a long-term vision of wanting to create a campus there that would be there for hundreds of years, is the way that we were looking at it. And we also wanted to be part of a robust innovation ecosystem. But institutional goals like that generally run a little bit counter to traditional commercial economic development goals and the bottom line. So this really became about balancing the development potential against the goals of the institution and really about placemaking. And then we started the hard work of negotiating changes to this existing plan in order to be able to enable what we felt was the right vision for us. And we thought would be a good outcome overall. Next slide, please. So we developed win-win strategies and synergies throughout the negotiation process with some solutions that we felt were significant improvements for us and created win-wins overall. We slightly modified the plan at Reed Avenue from a dog leg through the site to a pivot, which gave us a little bit more site development potential. And working through the whole process of what it would take to move the approved above grade parking to below grade parking. That put some stressors on the institution in other ways, but it was really important to the site, and we were able to work that out. That allowed us to open up the site and be able to receive into the campus rather than having the parking garage there and a wall at that really important edge. The K-12 site on the north end, while it's important from a relationship and that innovation continuum perspective, that was moved into phase 2 of the development. And that allowed us to drop that through street and really aggregate those blocks together to create a feasible campus site. Next slide. So here we're zooming in, and we carved out open space from that overall development potential envelope, dividing that into 3 separate buildings. And here you can see we have academic building 1, which is the building that's currently under construction. And that'll be their biggest building on the site. And this, by doing it this way, it also allowed us to phase in academic 2 and 3 over time as our campus grows. Another key move here to support innovation and the district overall was creating within that urban framework the raised plaza there, that raised pedestrian crossing from campus to the rest of the development. And then specifically tying to development potential that we were able to work with the developers on off campus within a building, to be able to lease some space there to support partnerships and innovation space that would further foster partnerships and spin-offs from the institution and within our academic building 1 space. And so we were looking to that type of space to also create incubators and accelerators. Next slide, please. So the shapes of the zoning envelopes were very intentional and specific. In part, we wanted to create surprise delight as you moved through our campus, but also there were some key things that we did that tied back to the dramatic landscape experience you have here and at our Blacksburg main campus. And so we wanted to highlight this fantastic urban context, but also tie back to Virginia Tech and our brand. For example, the campus is organized around a green space, very similar to the way May campus is organized around the drill field, our large signature open space here. But within this tight urban context, everything is doing double or triple duty. So for example, the green space here also hosts a 30,000 gallon cistern underground, which is just one of our many sustainability components of the campus and site. We also really worked hard to adjust grading across this site to ensure that it was fully accessible. So we wanted a site without any stairs and slopes less than 5%, without any ramps either, because we really wanted to ensure this was a welcoming place for all. So next slide, please. And here we have the 3/4 aerial rendering. North is to your right in this image. And you can see how those zoning envelopes took shape and then the open space that we carved out for campus. One element that was really important to us was to ensure opportunities to have science on display. And so during this process, it worked really well with also the city's goals to activate the street level within the district, while giving us the opportunity to leverage that science on display as our brand of retail, if you will. And then you'll see that play out as you see more on the design that Sven will share with you. And to the building program next. I just wanted to touch on this briefly as we move away from master planning. I just have one slide on it here about programming in general. So I generally don't like the term future proof. I prefer future flexible. And I like to think of all of our buildings as flexible containers, ideally. And so Smith Group incorporated a base spacing within this building that gives us a flexible approach to be able to adapt as technology, as we know, will change dramatically over time and over the life of this building. We also did another really important thing here that we called democratizing the perimeter, which was really a big deal for Virginia Tech because it signaled a significant change for us within this facility in particular. And it wasn't really easy actually to come to this agreement internally, but it was really important to our development here. And it aligned with our design principles. We were able to largely move offices off that perimeter to the interior and then keep that perimeter open to views and shared daylighting. And we think this really improves from a well-being perspective, the quality of that space. So we're very excited about that. Next slide. In August of 2020, the university hired Lance Collins as our inaugural vice president and executive director of the Innovation Campus. And Lance joined us from Cornell, where he had served as the dean of engineering and was also a significant part of the Cornell Tech initiative. So he brought that experience with him. But one of Lance's big goals coming into this was to create the most diverse graduate tech program in the country. And so, you know, that means diversity of thought, background, ideas. All of these things are really important to help unlock the potential of technology and together with our design principles, we feel that we're really well positioned to support his important goal with the physical realm there that we're creating. Virginia Tech's also partnering with Alexandria City Public Schools to enhance science, technology, and engineering and math opportunities for students within the public schools, and to create potential pathways directly straight up through to higher ed. We have some new partnership programs in place that allows undergraduate students at 5 other state institutions to apply early and earn graduate credits in master's degree programs that would be based out of our innovation campus. And so we're really excited about bringing that pipeline to fruition. Next slide, please. Our goal is to produce well, we've got targets for 750 master's candidates each year by the time we get to 2030. So we'll be producing 750 each year is one of our significant goals. But we've also determined that our primary areas of research focus really lie directly at that intersection of technology and the human experience. And we seek to add value to the human experience as technology becomes so integral to all of our lives. And we think that the Innovation Campus, the programs, our focus there is really we're going to see great advancements out of that. So let's talk a little bit about our impact. Next slide. As we stand today, really good things are already starting to happen out of the relationships that we're developing and the work that we're doing and the programs that we have already stood up and are building. We think this is a great start. The ecosystem is starting to develop around us. We're starting to bring in our leading edge academics and researchers into the region. Some of them were already there, but this gives them more of a platform and a matrix to work from. This talent and proximity, we think, is really crucial to making initiatives like smart cities initiatives really thrive and happen. And one case study of that is the Smart Mobility Coalition, which Virginia Tech is sort of leading that coalition and bringing folks together. So we bring the expertise and how to build coalition together with the technical expertise, and then can roll that out and get buy-in and partnerships to really bring something like that to fruition. We've also done a lot of work in 5G and NICS-G already. We held a roundtable in National Landing, and that has generated a bunch of spinoffs and coalitions and other advancements and things that we'll be doing directly in and around the campus itself. We envision that partnerships only continue to grow in and around the district as it becomes a reality and it becomes a true test bed for new technologies in the urban landscape. Next slide. So here's a construction camera view. This is looking east directly at Academic Building 1. You can see that the year is long gone. Everything is under construction. And we just took this image, the snapshot from last week, actually. And so I'll get close to turning it over to Rob here, but I just want to take one last slide to look at the rendering for our campus. Next slide, please. This is our campus looking north. And you can really see how our vision for this area is really reshaping that urban landscape. And we have a lot more to share with you on the development process, architecture, key site and building sustainability features. Everything is woven into this. But for now, I will turn it over to Rob Kearns and the City of Alexandria.
Thank you, Lisa. As Brian said, I'm not bored in the City of Alexandria with development these days, but I do have a special place in my heart for North Potomac Yard. This is a crown jewel of a lot of our development efforts these days, and we're thrilled with the partnership that we have with Virginia Tech and the Innovation District in Potomac Yard. I'm going to focus on and sort of pull back a little bit, zoom out, if you will, and talk a bit more about the neighborhood and the municipal perspective in approaching innovation and transformation of this neighborhood. Next slide. So Potomac Yard is, at one time, it was one of the largest rail yards on the East Coast. And so the city was looking at transformation of this place and creating basically a whole new district or neighborhood for the city. And so we had already, through various small area planning, master planning, and small area planning efforts, had been positioning this larger neighborhood of Potomac Yard into wanting it to be a dynamic mixed-use neighborhood with millions of square feet of residential, office, hotels, to add to the city fabric, extend the city streets into this location. And so really the Virginia Tech vision and the municipal vision in Potomac Yard were really sort of two visions that really found each other and were well matched. And the Alexandria was sort of well positioned to take advantage of Virginia Tech's overall vision for their campus. But just Potomac Yard in general, it's a larger neighborhood with more residential to the south, and then as you move to the north, it becomes more urban, mixed use, and commercial as we get to the Arlington border. And it's really about location here, with with Route 1 and the Parkway on either sides, the airport to the north, and also the river and lots of open space directly adjacent to this neighborhood. Next slide. And so really that vision and the small area plan also matched well in terms of the principles that Lisa mentioned. We were looking to push the envelope on sustainability and carbon neutrality in this neighborhood. We were looking for a mix of land uses already, and the campus only adds to that. We wanted to foster design excellence. We want to create a neighborhood and buildings here that are going to stand the test of time and add to Alexandria's overall fabric. We wanted a transportation choice and a mix of modes here, which add to the connectedness of this neighborhood. And the green infrastructure, the open space of the neighborhood, we wanted to be able to build parks, plazas, various green infrastructure that ecologically and for play enhance the quality of life of the new residents and investors in this neighborhood. Next slide. And so, we had these broad visions and aspirations, but we also had to then take those aspirations and boil them down or codify them, if you will, for planning purposes to create land use approvals. Virginia Tech came to us, they want to implement and move forward. We needed to create the next step beyond the vision with zoning. And so, as Lisa mentioned, this part of Potomac Yard or North Potomac Yard was broken down into two phases. Phase 1, which is essentially the innovation district and the campus. You can see the Regal Cinemas that was there is labeled here in the slide. And then the phase 2, or what people often call the Target Shopping Center, is for future phases of development going forward. But we've planned all of that zoning and that development to make sure that as investors come in, they know what is going to be happening and how the full build out of this neighborhood of North Potomac Yard will occur. It's 69 acres overall, and phase 1 is only 19 of those acres, just to give you a sense of scale. Next slide. And so, in addition to the zoning, we were also wanting to foster with Virginia Tech this idea of innovation. And so we layered over the CDD zone something called the Innovation District. And here, what the Innovation District does is it's looking to cluster leading edge institutions in this overall neighborhood. We currently have the Institute for Defense Analysis there open today, as well as the National Industries for the Blind, and others are coming. We planned a metro station to basically induce this neighborhood, and that metro station is due to open shortly. You can see that being constructed out there today. We wanted a dynamic mix of incubators and accelerators, along with other mix of uses to create that activation and an exchange of ideas. And that comes along with the urban fabric of a dynamic streetscape and parks, things that are going to create the mixing up of people and ideas, both in the buildings, but also at the ground level as you're moving to and from various places. All of these elements work together to create this bubbling district of innovation. Next slide. And so shifting back to the CDD concept plan, again, we wanted to make sure that block by block, we planned we master planned for placemaking and for mixing of uses and institutions here in this district. So the CDD concept plan becomes kind of that roadmap that the municipality and then the applicants can use as they're looking to invest in this broader neighborhood, including Virginia Tech. It lays out the land use, the building heights, the locations for affordable housing, the metro station, various densities and the frameworks for the streets and the pedestrian connections. And as Lisa said, these frameworks then become the start for the design that shape the buildings and the urban fabric overall. Next slide. So I have to say that this project, it was a tremendous opportunity, but it was also a very, very accelerated process, as Lisa can attest to. We essentially went from concepts to building approvals in just over 1 year. So in March of 2020, as we were also in the mix of the pandemic, as Lisa mentioned, we were doing master plan amendments and the design excellence standards to set the broad vision in place. In June of that same year, we were already doing the zoning text amendments, the CDD concept plan, and the preliminary infrastructure plan, which was the ground plane for beginning construction. And then in the fall of 2020 and into the winter, we were looking at the master plan for sustainability, which is a key guiding document, as well as all the development special use permits. And there were 7 of them in total in this first wave in phase 1. Next slide. So this just gives a bird's eye view of phase 1 and the innovation district. So you can see all of the various buildings that have been approved in phase 1. Next slide. So in addition to the campus and all of its benefits, there were additional things that the city was seeking in order to mitigate impacts of the development in this overall district, which also benefit the campus. But we have the standard development benefits with site plans of public art, bike share, transportation management plan monies, and affordable housing. The affordable housing package alone, was overall worth over $15 million when you put it all together for that particular aspect, which was an important consideration for this neighborhood. Community facilities, there are monies for a new theater, for $15 million for a new school, as Lisa mentioned, and dedication of a specific block for school and affordable housing in this overall neighborhood. And then open space, we have multiple parks that are designed, and I'll get to in a few moments, but also offsite open space monies towards outside neighborhood facilities for the broader city. Next slide. So I just want to touch on several of the aspects of this overall district that help shape the urban form and the site-wide elements, and they allow for sort of smart city planning and overall innovation. So first is the street network. We had a grid which creates smart mobility options and transportation choice. But in addition to that, we had to address public versus private streets, so that we could put in the public infrastructure we needed and have enough connectivity. But we also very deliberately created some private streets that allow Virginia Tech and other building owners to do things on those streets, activate those streets, even do some smart city planning, urban mobility experimentation that they wouldn't normally be able to do on a typical street. So that was one aspect we looked at. Next slide. We also looked at the open space and the public realm of this project, the green infrastructure, for ecology and for play in this overall district. On the ecology side, we were trying to manage stormwater while providing open space, as well as, creating, we looked at creating a well field for geothermal and a SWE component that will be talked about a little bit later. But so doing energy and stormwater while also creating recreation, significant recreation options in this overall district. We have a community level park. We've got plazas at the metro station where there's activation and even dining. And then there's Market Square adjacent to the campus. Again, these spaces around the campus that are going to create the dynamism and places for people to meet and have fun. Next slide. So almost every project we spend a lot of time talking about parking. Well, this overall effort was no exception, even though it's right on top of the new metro station. But so we tried to really minimize parking to the greatest degree possible while sharing those facilities all underground, so they would not take up valuable space on the ground plane above. But so the minimum amount of parking possible that we required, but also having shared parking strategies and parking management systems underground so that this element would be properly right-sized, if you will, for this project overall. Next slide. And so we even getting down to the basic gray infrastructure, the pump station, this project needed a pump station, and that also got integrated as part of our overall park. It is obviously serving important sewage functions overall, but it's a feature in our park. There are going to be educational exhibits as part of the overall architecture of this building, as well as being the backdrop for a play area in the park overall. So this theme of things doing more than one thing at once in order to be innovative and think sustainably about the investments in this neighborhood. Next slide. This just provides a picture of that pump station and how it rests in the park system, and you can see how it's integrated into the overall landscape. Next slide. So Lisa's already talked about the Virginia Tech campus. I'm not going to talk further about that, but what I'm going to do is just take you on a little tour down the main street of the district so you can see the other buildings in relation to the campus and how the dynamism of this district is coming together and the urban fabric is going to unfold. So next slide. So you can see the first building, Academic Building 1, here highlighted. Next slide. So this is the crown jewel building that will create the landmark for the campus on the northern end. Next slide. Walking south, you can see the partnership building. Next slide. This building will be a counterpoint to the Virginia Tech building, where it's going to have a glass veil of a different scale and housing innovation uses, as Lisa mentioned. Will also face onto the park to the east. Next slide. Across the street from the partnership building will be another office on block 14. Next slide. This building features, loggias in the architecture, and it's a high performance building with celebrating lots of open spaces, but also open spaces on the rooftop here to, again, have dynamic things happening at the ground and on the roof levels. Next slide. Moving into the residential buildings, blocks of the district. Next slide. So this building is a much more contemporary expression facing the metro station plaza to the south. Next slide. The other residential building in the district. Next slide. Is more of an industrial mercantile style building, again mixing up the architectural expression and style to vary the experience of of people in the district. Next slide. We have 2 office buildings. Next slide. The first one facing the metro station itself. You can see the metro station exit here in the front. And this building is meant to have the fins move and ripple as you go along and see different perspectives of this office building as you come off the metro station, and it will be a gateway into the innovation district. Next slide. The last office building on the south side of Metro Plaza. This is essentially, really to evoke the more of a modern office building and a overall expression, but it's actually in terracotta. Next slide. So this is just the website where you can get additional information and updates about this overall district. Thank you.
Good evening. So you've just heard from Lisa and Rob. A lot of significant planning had been incorporated into the project prior to the building and site design. Go to the next slide. I'll walk you through the design and how it was subsequently developed. So this is a view of the project, of course, is seen from the southeast. Amazon is straight ahead, north, National Airport, and UC Beyond to the right. The mixed-use Potomac Yard Innovation District is just behind in this view. I'll start with some broad facts about the project. It's about 300,000 square feet, academic building, primarily configured for graduate level computer science and computer engineer program, and features, therefore, research and testing labs, offices, instructional spaces, collaboration, and support spaces. So the campus is around 4 acres, and it'll eventually accommodate the 3 buildings. The future 2 buildings are 150,000 square feet each and are ghosted into the right and beyond. The first building is 11 stories tall because it has, tall floor-to-floor heights because it's lab, so it reaches about 180 feet. The program, or the project, is a new 21st century campus that will redefine Virginia Tech's presence in Northern Virginia. But the first thing you notice about the project is the gem shape and highly articulated skin design. So I'll walk you through the process that resulted with that. And of course, the work is a result of a very large team within Smith Group, and of course all the consultants as well. Next slide. So the process originates with the guiding principles that Lisa noted. Virginia Tech provided the guiding principles to the design team at the outset of the project. So they were essential for the large team to be able to establish priorities and to shape the trajectory of the project throughout the process. The design was to be centered on the principles of sustainability, health and wellness, green and social collaborative spaces, accessibility, connectivity, flexibility, and integrated technology. But Virginia Tech did not want to use fossil fuels on site and wanted to see a pathway to neutrality. So one of the core themes of the project, and we've heard sort of a reference to it, is the recentering of computer science in a humanist context as a means to amplify learning and research outcomes. So you'll see how that concept synthesizes the principles above and impacts the design program and overall approach. Next slide, please. So I'll just run through the site design, building massing, and skin design. The future plan illustrates the first academic building and the 2 future buildings forming a complete campus. The south to the right consists of an implied entry portal that Lisa noted, and emphasizes hardscape and an urban character that ties into the innovation district to the south. And then as you move to the left, to the north, the space between the buildings is compressed and then expands to a lush campus green that features rain gardens as well as a campus lawn ideal for game day and other types of activities. The greenscape visually connects then to the large linear park across the street to the east. And then despite the grade differential between north and south, it's all continuously accessible without ramps or stairs. Next slide, please. Before the second phase buildings are constructed, their footprints are accommodating right now surface parking, but that'll ultimately all go below grade. Next slide. Among Virginia Tech's goals were to achieve a high level of sustainability and integrated technology. As I mentioned, a pathway to net zero and a prohibition of fossil fuels on site. So While the building design and systems will minimize energy use and will employ passive approaches, also, we look for a pathway to generate electrical power on site. Photovoltaics are often employed, of course, on rooftops, but we wanted to study to see if they could be used on other surfaces effectively as well. So the dome diagram at the center represents every possible facade orientation relative to the sun. The highest potential photovoltaic output for the site is represented in the red zones. They're not necessarily in typical rooftop locations per se, but in fact are conceptually on the south facing or southeast facing orientations. So we established a process to move from the zoning envelope, which you see on the left, to the final massing on the right. You'll notice that the zoning envelope on the left is actually the inverse of an ideal photovoltaic orientation because it's high on the south and low on the north. Next slide. So in the spirit of the project's computational science and innovation program, our computational design team developed a generative parametric algorithm that's initialized with the zoning envelope, and then it flexes the geometry, pushing and pulling the mass, testing facets, and then analyzes each resulting form in terms of potential PV output, impact on the program area, and impact on the zoning envelope. So the process learns and categorizes results along the way. Then ended up iterating over 1,000 variations and then ranked them. Go to the next slide. So here are a few of the individual massing examples. In the end, the team found that a small number of well-oriented facets produced the best results. So we could then further iterate and refine the various geometries kind of moving forward with the process. Next slide. So additional sculpting of the form was needed to amplify human factors, adding terraces and pushing in the ground floor to accommodate a welcoming protected zone close to the building. And then since the site is so close to DCA flight path, design of the rooftop, the fifth facade, was actually an important design consideration. Next slide. So the resulting ground floor view from the south, you can see the skin design expresses technology, but weaves together technology with warm elements, creating visual patterning, human scaled elements, and texture. Terracotta fins and acid etched spandrel glass provide the warm tone. The ochre color is a reference to selected warm tones found in Hokie stone, a dolomite limestone pervasive on the main Virginia Tech campus in Blacksburg. The terracotta fin depths and angles actually vary slightly between each facet to provide passive solar shading and glare control. Next slide. So this view is from the southwest and illustrates the variation of fin depths and fin angles that erode in areas to showcase and express internal program. You'll notice that the building does not have an express penthouse. Those functions are carefully integrated into the massing. You'll see more in Jameson's presentation, but I'll note that on this elevation, the horizontal slot on the 8th floor, which accommodates air intakes from mechanical spaces behind them. Next slide. This view from the northwest illustrates how the building becomes more porous as you move around to the north. And then we keep going. Next slide. The view from the northeast illustrates the building as a dynamic backdrop. So it's to open up also to the campus green in the foreground. Next slide. So once the skin materiality and technology were established, each facet was optimized for PV power, solar heat gain, daylighting, glare, views, and urban form. On a rectilinear building, of course, the building faces have very different orientations, but with the faceted gem shape, each face has different but sometimes subtle variations in character. The bottom left shows a computational process which optimizes fin depth and spacing and slope for daylighting, glare, and PV output optimization. The bottom right was a study analyzing potential reflections to the nearby DCA control tower. So we ended up having to make some slight adjustments to the building facets in order to minimize any reflections. The analysis reinforced the degree to which the project has a kind of a high degree of site specificity, really optimized for the specific constraints of the site. Next slide. 3 different photovoltaic technologies are used on the project. So the top row of images represents conventional rooftop PV, and it's designed as a trellis, providing shading for the roof terrace. The middle right images represent building integrated photovoltaics, BIPV, which in which the PV cells are laminated to the outer light of an insulated glass unit. Those are found to be effective on the southeast facets. The bottom right row of images represents photovoltaic horizontal fins, which are used on the south facade, and they provide passive shading in addition to the power generation itself. Next slide. This rendering then expresses and really shows the qualitative aspects of the BIPV areas, providing generous daylighting, clear areas for views, but with biophilic dappled light and shadow patterns throughout the space. Next slide. Both Virginia Tech and the City of Alexandria emphasized throughout the importance of activation and transparency of the ground floor and connecting the building to the surrounding campus and to the public realm. So in the context of a compact campus and future urban environment, there's not really an ideal location for the back house functions. So loading and other building support spaces had to be carefully considered. The next few images speak to the design of the ground floor building perimeter. Next slide. Yeah, so in the lobby, taking up most of the east facade features a high degree of transparency, inviting connection between interior and exterior. And the geometry of the building mass at this point, enters the building and lobby and becomes tangible and tactile and experiential. Next slide. The visitor center, which is on the south side, features the possibility for a tour starting point and information about the university visible from the mixed-use development to the south. And then wrapping around, next image to the west side, the building features views into the loft, which is a two-story space where students will work on capstone projects, and there'll be a full display of instrumentation and science research and projects and activity, probably well into the night on display. Next slide. So what's typically designed as a loading pad has been reimagined as a flex plaza. So the loading dock overhead doors are flush with the adjacent facade and feature a corrugated perforated metal for texture. Pedestrian bridge leads over a rain garden, becomes a threshold between this space and the main campus. Next slide. And wrapping around back to the northeast, this is a portion of blank wall that was concealing internal mechanical spaces. So it's been activated by configuring it with white glass boards and interspersed with saw cut Hokie stone block walls, but really surrounded by green. So it has a very kind of immersive quality to it. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as part of the concept of designing with a human-centered focus, the building program has been augmented with a network of spaces specifically addressing wellness. And Lisa referenced this idea of democratizing the perimeter, and so really everyone has access to the perimeter. But we introduced these special spaces called brain gyms, which are essentially refuel stations to enhance the way we think and act, putting health and wellness at the center of the student experience. So there's spaces for cognitive restoration to balance with the mental focus that students and faculty will have to maintain throughout the day. So we have some examples of those spaces. Next image, this is one of the brain gyms. It's on the second floor on the south side, and it has two areas. One is for analog gaming, and the other, which is sort of kind of behind this view, is where digital gaming can occur. Next image, we have a few of these spaces which are more about quiet, calm, solitude, surrounded by biophilic materials and acoustically absorptive surfaces. Next slide. So the treehouse features, it's kind of high up in the building and features dappled light, wood, biophilic elements that encourage quiet contemplation. Next image. And then the Learning Commons, which is a stop on a graphically kind of indicated walking path that leads all through the building that encourages kinetic movement. And then there are stretching stations at various kind of points along the way. Next slide. So principles of wellness are incorporated into the lab spaces as well. So this is the drone lab on the west side of the building. Features a 2-story drone cage, but all the lab spaces feature ample daylighting and views. Other high intensity labs within the building include there's a IoT lab, immersive visualization, cyber physical, as well as a whole variety of other spaces. Next slide. So back to this, this connection to, to light and views and the campus itself and green spaces and variety. So the roof kind of participates in that flexibility as well. So features planted zones that have topography that can support different kinds of plantings. And then of course, dramatic views around Virginia, the airport district. Next slide, just another view, but there are multiple zones on the terrace. So you could have multiple groups up here at the same time using the space. Next slide. And then the photovoltaic trellis, which extends really the times of years that the space and the terrace may be used beyond, into the warmer months because you've got the protection from the sun. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jameson to present high performance systems.
Thanks, Finn. In the interest of time, I'm going to dive right in and probably talk faster than I need to. We go next slide. As the engineer in the bunch, I'd probably be remiss not to start my presentation with a fuzzy, borderline illegible chart here for everyone to take a look at, but I promise this one's pretty impactful. We knew this project had very high aspirations for sustainability and resilient design, specifically some aggressive energy and carbon goals, and that meeting those project goals was going to force us to look beyond traditional system design. Early on, with some conceptual shoebox modeling, we were able to understand that, due to the size of this building and the variation in program space types and occupancy schedules, there's actually a large overlap in heating and cooling demands throughout this building, almost up to 30% of the annual operating hours. So we knew that designing a system that tapped into heat recovery potential was definitely going to need to be a pillar of the system design. Next slide. Another opportunity that presented itself is the site itself. This is a unique project in that it's a building within a campus within a district. And as Robert touched on earlier, the wastewater capacity of the overall district actually offered us an opportunity for energy exchange. Again, very early in the conceptual design of this project, we worked closely with the city to help evaluate when the overall capacity of wastewater in the district was going to make sense to tap into for that capacity. And to the city's credit, putting some planning into something that was going to come to fruition in a 10-year time frame, as you can kind of see that point of inflection between the orange and the green bars there, is pretty incredible to be making sure that we have the space and the system components in play to tap into in the future. Next slide. So that really sets us up for kind of the overall system approach that we took on here for the ICAB 1 building. As I mentioned, you can see kind of out there with block 4, we've got some energy exchange capacity in that SWE system. That stands for Sewage Wastewater Energy Exchange, for those that are wondering. The number 5 there with a lot of dots, that's the bore field. That represented another opportunity for, a source sink energy exchange. And then something else that we started to look into were, deep foundation energy piles, which is actually putting, bores into the deep piles that exist under each of these buildings. We assessed capacity of each of these systems and decided that what might make more sense is to dedicate one of those components to each building. So ICAB 1, the building we're talking about today, will take the SWE capacity, leaving that concept of deep piles in the geothermal bore field for the future buildings. We also started to look at if it made sense to centralize a central plant that would serve this full campus. And obviously that makes great efficiencies for the building in the 2 buildings in the future, but it ended up being something that first cost and program space alone wouldn't really allow. So the concept that we have at ICAB 1 is something that can be replicated at each of the buildings to follow. And it really centers on this multi-source energy exchange system, meeting a project guiding principle of being fully electrified and using no fossil fuel for your thermal energy generation. That's a tall demand. And we needed to tap into this multi-source energy exchange to accommodate that. So what we really have is a site that is using predominantly energy recovery between systems, and then is trimmed with air source heat pumps and air-cooled chillers. Next slide. We did a lot of energy modeling for something like this project, and in my experience, the actual physical representation of this model is probably more advanced than most any other energy model that we've produced recently. Specifically looking at things like the fin structure that Sven was talking about, the way that a building integrated PV or the way that a PV fin affects the overall performance of the glazing unit below it. All of those were things that we wanted to take into account in this study. We're estimating that this project on day one probably falls somewhere in the 75 to 85 range on an EUI scale. And then in the future, as that squeeze system becomes available from a capacity standpoint, and as VT and operations really hit their stride owning and operating this building, that EUI should probably drop to somewhere 65 to 70. Next slide. That's a lot about the main mechanical infrastructure that helps us meet the energy and the carbon goal. But obviously sustainability is a much broader topic, and I just quickly wanted to touch on the fact that water was also a heavy point of consideration. This is looking at a Lee baseline for water consumption. This diagram is called a Sankey diagram, and it's working from left to right, and just really showing you how much the cooling towers represent in the overall water consumption on site. And go to next slide. This is saying that if we move to a highly efficient central plant, not the concept that we've got in play, but does tap into that energy, the heat recovery between heating and cooling only, obviously you can greatly reduce the amount of water that is being used by that cooling tower system. The other thing you're seeing here is that we're beginning to capture some of the rainwater in this concept and use that to offset the cooling tower use as well. The final concept here, this is actually where we end up. Next slide. Getting rid of those cooling towers altogether. We have a 50,000 gallon rainwater collection cistern on site, and between the electrified central plant concept and the collection of rainwater to backfill our flushing demand, we're basically limiting potable water use on site to your drinking water sources and your sinks. Next slide. So I started with a really fuzzy engineering graphic, and I just wanted to end with something that felt more at home in the presentation, especially when it's showcasing something like a beautiful central plant. What you're seeing here is how the outdoor mechanical yard is actually existing between those kind of turned up fins on that trellis, integrating with the PV that Sven talked about. A lot of careful study going into the placement of this central plant from an airflow standpoint. It sits on a fully isolated structural slab from an acoustical standpoint. And that facade of glazing that looks out over to this yard is actually also heavily acoustically treated, knowing that this is potentially a loud component. It is visually and acoustically shaded from the program just inside. And next slide. And just carrying that overall concept of wellness and interior quality of space, I just wanted to demonstrate that the radiant ceiling panel system that serves the primary heating and cooling of all of our interior spaces was heavily integrated into a ceiling system that really you can't differentiate a heating and cooling panel from the otherwise metal ceiling panels in this system. The perforation of these panels, be it the heating and cooling or the standard ceiling panel, is again providing a high level acoustical treatment, and it is all highly integrated between lighting, AV and IT, and any other ceiling component to really give a very polished look that almost lets you forget about the fact that those systems exist at all. Just some photos here of the project, obviously in construction, steel going up. It's been an exciting process. and last slide. And this, if folks are so inclined, and after the fact, you know, if you get a copy of this presentation, or if you take a quick photo now, this QR code will actually take you to a virtual tour of the building where you can see, you know, some of the renderings we've been through, and actually a lot more with some description of these space types. I think that might be it.
And I'm not just staring at my phone, I promise, because I'm, you know, dealing with stuff. I'm actually checking out that QR code. It's pretty sweet. So thanks for putting that up there, James. We're going to go ahead and dig into questions. I've got a couple for Lisa to kick it off. Then we have a couple from the audience here. I think that the first, y'all started to talk about industry partnerships and some things like that. You know, this was a response to HQ2 to attract them in, but you know, the point of these ecosystems is they feed and they grow on themselves. And so I'm kind of curious, as you begin to build momentum, what kind of industry partnerships have you been seeing evolve out of this ecosystem?
So we've had two really significant partnerships that we've been able to announce. First was with Boeing, and that was $50 million in commitment over a period of years. But that's really addressing a whole wide variety of initiatives, and that's a pretty big deal for us. One of the things that they're supporting is not only scholarships, but also looking at developing, you know, sophisticated means to do diversity recruiting to really support that initiative. And then they also included in that package funding for K-12 coordinator. So that allowed us to hire that K-12 coordinator that really can help drive diversity. And you know, we don't see a lot of diversity in the computer science, computer engineering space. And so I think this is going to be really big for us if we can really make a lot of good connections with K-12. And then Northrop Grumman, they committed $12.5 million towards quantum research, and that allows us to stand up, I believe that's the Center of Quantum Architecture and Software Development. And so quantum is, you know, a big tech space right now. A lot of people are starting to gravitate towards doing a lot of work in that area. And so that's going to be a focus for the Innovation Campus. And then, you know, other than those really significant principal gifts that we've received so far, we actually have a principal gift officer who's going to be, she joined the team in December of last year. So she'll really be focusing on that. But aside from those, we've done a lot of other things too. JBG Smith is one of the significant developers of National Landing and this project area that we're working with. And working with them, we've done quite a few things. We had the 5G what's next sort of a roundtable, and that what generated out of that was a lot of other coalitions and initiatives that are really driving a lot of change in that space. And we're working with a lot of folks in other areas, specifically on smart cities, developing a lot of things in that realm. So they've been a good partner with us too.
Awesome. And then I was actually kind of curious. You talked about the innovation, the incubator spaces, the tech startup spaces, and I was just kind of curious how those are structured. Is it sort of free rent for a little while if you're a Virginia Tech alum, for example, and you get a 10 by 10 square foot, you know, cube, and then as you scale, sort of you get charged rent until you can grow up, or how is that sort of aligned?
So we haven't fully developed that model of what that will be, but we've done a lot of work in benchmarking and looking at, you know, does it need to be an accelerator? Does it need to be an incubator? And all of these mean different things. We wanted to position ourselves when we're ready to do that because that would be, right now, we'd be planning to place that in building 10, which, you know, hasn't started construction yet. But we wanted to position ourselves in the right way, in the right place, not only to support Innovation Campus and the work that we're doing, but what might work well within the whole galaxy now of other type of innovation and incubator and accelerator spaces that are out there. And so we needed to calibrate and do the right thing. And I don't think we've made a final decision on what that ought to be. But ideally, you know, we would be giving that right kind of space for the researchers then, and through these partnerships, to spin off companies that help to grow the tech sector in this area.
Yeah, no, it always seems like it's more art than science to get that tech transfer sort of matrix worked out.
Yes.
But it looks phenomenally cool. Got a few questions from the audience, and Robert, I think most of these, a couple of them probably are a little focused on you. I think I heard the K-12 coordinator, but one of the questions we've got is, you know, there are a lot of children living with 5 to 10 minute walking area, and is there a new elementary school perhaps in the works for this area? What about sort of structured open space fields sort of along that, what was it, 69 acre development that you guys talked about?
Yeah, the Lisa mentioned there was a school plan for where the Virginia Tech campus is currently going to be located. But in the update of the master plan, basically that school site was moved. So it was moved to phase 2, basically right near where Glebe and Route 1 intersect. Block 23 is where a future school and an affordable housing project are both proposed to be located on that new city block. It isn't yet determined if it's going to be only an elementary school. That's a decision for the school district, but it is designated for, the monies and the block are designated for an urban school campus. In terms of structured open space, there will be various spaces in the community park that run along the whole eastern edge of Potomac Yard. You know, half that park's already built. There are various play spaces, basketball, tennis, in the south part of the yard. Then in the north part, there are going to be various spaces for active and passive play. Actual like soccer fields and those sorts of facilities they're interspersed. You know, we have at the south end of the yard, we have the middle school campus and all the play fields down there. We have Simpson Fields in the middle of Potomac Yard at Monroe and Route 1, and then 4 Mile Run Park are also in an adjacent neighborhood that are walkable, bikeable to this neighborhood. So there's, you know, that's been considered as part of the larger planning of the city.
Cool. Yeah, and we had another question come in about affordable housing. I know I heard the grant and you're talking about it on the new city block. Like what kind of scale are you looking at for affordable housing in terms of just square footage or units?
The dedicated block is meant to house a affordable housing project, which we would work with a nonprofit partner. Okay. To build that. That's the model that we've been using for delivering affordable housing. And that's likely to be somewhere in the 100 to 150 unit range on that for that particular project. But then, you know, I mentioned there's an additional $15 million worth of monies that will go towards buying down either another project as a whole or buying down units within buildings that are part of the neighborhood. So I can't give you really a unit count on that. It's going to depend on the unit sizes and square footages, but clearly, you know, it's a sizable investment in affordable housing as part of the overall project.
That's awesome. And then this one will be more for Sven and Jameson. There's we're wondering about the PVs on building 1, how they're incorporated in the envelope. are they attached to the mullions in the layer behind the glass? Are they placed actually on the, I think you talked about on the roof, they were actually adhered. But are they, is it full blown BIPV or are they actually attached to the mullions or other parts of the enclosure?
Yeah, sure. So the rooftop PV, which are more the typical, photovoltaic cell units that you see, they sit on it. There's basically a grid of steel. There's a trellis that sits 10 feet above the roof terrace, and so there's a grid of steel, and then those are basically clipped to the steel with gaps in between for light and air. So they just kind of and they actually are tilted slightly to be more effective. So then on the south side of the building, where we have horizontal fins, basically that's PV material that's laminated, kind of sandwiched between two layers of clear glass.
Okay.
And then and then that's all outboard of the curtain wall system. There are brackets that come out from the curtain wall system, and then those fins just sit on the brackets, and they're supported by the brackets. Then if you move to the southeast side of the building, where it looks like sort of a grid on the glass, and that really is an insulated glass unit. So it's curtain wall with an insulated glass unit, but the only difference is the insulated glass unit is just a sandwich of two layers of glass. That outer layer of glass is actually a laminate. It's two layers in and of itself, and then sandwiched in between are the photovoltaics. So it's just all completely flush, and it really is integrated that way. It's integrated into the architecture. It's not additive. It's not an additional component. It's just a kind of a more highly specialized version of the glass itself.
Very cool. And how much I probably missed this in Jameson's part, but how much of the actual electrical load is accommodated in the PV array for the building?
I think it's close to 400,000 kilowatt hours per year annually, which it's the equivalent, close to almost 40 households of power continuously. But this is a lab building that requires a tremendous amount of power. So it's somewhere between 5 and 10% of the power for the building. So it's still a small percentage, but it's actually a lot of power when you think about more like the equivalent residential power.
Sure. No. Yeah, I can only imagine the power demands of the drone lab. And then I guess the question for you guys is, so how do you see the technologies you're talking about here impacting future projects with building and campus design?
Well, I think there's a point which is just about how buildings can become much more kind of bespoke or much more kind of optimized for their particular site, and kind of adapting to their site. So I think there's a little bit of that. I think it was interesting to see how that, like, just, and Jameson can answer this part, but how the mechanical systems can speak to each other between, different phases and the municipal system. I mean, there's so many efficiencies that can be gained from having, like an interconnected system, moving heat from one building to another. And Jameson, you might want to kind of elaborate on that point.
I think that carrying that one step further, the big development here that this is showcasing and that we expect to see probably within the next 10 years is equipment that is tailored to this large building electrification approach. We are really trying to repurpose a lot of different components as they currently exist to meet this goal of an electrified building, a fully heat recovery central plant. But in the future, I think that specifically the heating demands of the mid-Atlantic and moving up the eastern seaboard climates, meeting a heating demand where sometimes you might have temperatures that drop to 20 or 10 degrees, that's really going to be the area that the mechanical system market sees a lot of explosion in.
Very cool. Yeah, and I gotta say, guys, I love the idea of the fifth facade. Having flown in and out of Reagan too much over the 20 years I've lived in DC, I've always thought roofs were for people, power, or plants. And you guys got both of them, 2 of the 3 up there. Well, actually, you got all 3. So you got the P trifecta. Maureen, I think we're going to wrap it up. I think you had some closing thoughts about some upcoming programs. I'll kick it off by just saying thank you to the panelists. This was fun, and it was pretty cool to learn more in detail about a project I've been watching for a long time. So take it away, Maureen.
All right, thank you so much. And that was wonderful. Really appreciate everybody sticking around for the little hiccup. I think you all would agree that it was completely worth it. So just want to say a few words of thank you as well to Brian, our moderator tonight, our panelists, to those of you in attendance this evening as well. Thank you to AIA Nova and AIA Virginia. The CAE truly appreciates your support. If you're interested in more of these events, you can see that we have a couple more coming up. So feel free to visit our website to learn more about our chapter. And with that, I just want to say thank you and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.